Imagine your office building is on fire. Thick smoke is filling the hallway, the alarms are blaring, and people are starting to panic.
A total nightmare scenario.
Right, an absolute nightmare. And in that exact moment, you do not want a boss who gathers everyone around to form a committee.
No, definitely not.
You don't want a leader who, asks for a show of hands to vote on which emergency exit feels most aligned with the company's core values.
That would be a disaster.
Exactly. In that moment, you want a dictator. You want someone to point at a door, yell an order, and demand absolute, unquestioning obedience.
Which is a perfect example of why leadership is entirely situational.
Yeah, and today we are looking at the exact science of why the most toxic leadership style is sometimes the only one that actually works. Okay, let's unpack this.
We are exploring a really fascinating stack of academic material today for this deep dive. It's anchored in a doctorate-level course on educational management, specifically looking at how instructional supervisors manage individuals and teams. And the sources draw heavily on scholars like Bush and Gordon. But while the context of the data is rooted in education, so we're talking principals, school heads, department supervisors, the underlying mechanics are universal.
Because the human brain doesn't completely rewire itself just because you walk out of a middle school and step into a corporate boardroom, right?
Yeah.
Or a hospital ward.
Exactly. People are people, no matter the setting.
So our mission today is to look at these academic blueprints of how elite administrators manage personnel. And we want to translate them into a masterclass on leadership and human motivation that you can apply to literally whatever team you are leading right now.
And what the research proves, quite definitively I might add, is that good management isn't some mystical aura you were just born with.
It's not just a gut feeling.
Right, it isn't an intuitive gut feeling at all. It is a highly structured, measurable process of guiding, supporting, and developing people. It is a literal science of cause and effect.
Meaning, if you pulled this specific lever, you will get this specific reaction in your team's performance.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about building a positive culture through very deliberate actions.
So before we can talk about the levers a leader pulls, we have to look at the machine they are operating,
The
right?
foundational skills.
Yeah. The research establishes this blueprint of prerequisite skills. To effectively manage individuals, the texts argue you need a baseline proficiency in effective communication, emotional intelligence, decision-making, conflict management, coaching, problem solving, and strict time management.
It's a comprehensive list.
It's a massive list. And the overarching goal of mastering all this is to enhance performance and build a positive culture. But I want to pause right here and look critically at this list because, to be honest, it feels like they are asking for a superhero.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, just think about the psychology behind these traits. Deep, empathetic, emotional intelligence requires patience, active listening, and a willingness to sit in the messy, gray areas of human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
But rigid, highly structured organizational time management requires this ruthless binary focus on deadlines and efficiency. You are basically asking someone to be a perfect therapist.
And a perfect human spreadsheet at the exact same time.
Exactly. It feels totally contradictory. Can one person actually master emotional intelligence and rigid organizational time management at the same time?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it does feel contradictory if you view leadership as a fixed personality type. But the research fundamentally rejects that idea.
Okay, so it's not a personality type.
Right. These skills aren't meant to be deployed all at once, at maximum volume every single minute of the day. Think of this foundation not as a static personality, but as an audio mixing board in a recording studio.
Oh, wow. I actually really like that. So you have different sliders for different skills.
Exactly. The core competency of a leader isn't perfection, it is adaptability.
So you adjust the sliders based on what's happening.
Yes. If a critical team member comes to your office on a Tuesday, and they are completely burnt out and dealing with a personal crisis, you slide the emotional intelligence and coaching faders all the way up to a 10.
And I'm guessing you slide time management down?
You slide it down to a 2, right? But on Friday afternoon, when a massive project deadline is 3 hours away and resources are bleeding out, you pull the empathy fader down and push the decision-making and organizational faders to the absolute maximum.
That makes total sense. The blueprint isn't about being everything to everyone all the time.
No, it is about possessing the capacity to shift gears dynamically based on the specific friction in front of you.
The skills are basically just potential energy. They are the sliders on the board. But to
Yeah.
actually turn that potential energy into kinetic energy to get work done, you have to make decisions.
Which brings us to the first major conceptual block in the research, the classic triangle of decision-making.
Okay.
The material breaks down 7 distinct leadership styles, but the first 3 are grouped together fundamentally by how power is distributed. It basically asks one simple question: who holds the authority to make a choice?
And point number 1 on that triangle is autocratic, or authoritarian leadership. The text describes this as strictly leader-centered.
Meaning the leader makes the decisions entirely alone.
Rules are rigidly enforced, and there is virtually zero participation from the team. Now, going back to our burning building example from earlier, I get why this is sometimes necessary. The mechanism of autocratic leadership provides absolute clarity.
It does. It cuts through the noise.
But outside of an emergency, the text notes this severely reduces morale. Why is the psychological toll so heavy here?
It comes down to a concept called agency. When you hire highly skilled professionals, they possess a deep internal drive to apply their expertise.
They want to use their brains.
Exactly. Under an autocratic system, you are stripping away their agency. You are telling them that their judgment is totally irrelevant.
Which has to be incredibly frustrating.
Psychologically, this creates severe cognitive dissonance for a professional. They are being paid for their brains, but treated as if they are just a pair of hands. Over time, that friction just destroys intrinsic motivation.
They stop caring about the outcome because they had no say in the process.
Right. However, the text is clear that when accountability must be absolute and time is of the essence, autocratic action is the only gear that actually works, like a principal independently dictating a new critical safety policy.
So the total opposite of that, point number 2 on the triangle, is democratic or participative leadership. This is shared decision-making.
Where the power is heavily distributed.
Yeah, you have open communication, and the leader acts more as a facilitator to build consensus, like consulting teachers on new instructional strategies. The obvious benefit here is that you restore that agency.
Because people support what they help create.
Exactly. If they voted on the strategy, they are psychologically invested in its success.
Precisely. You are trading speed for commitment. Democratic leadership is inherently slower because consensus takes time.
Right, meetings upon meetings.
But the execution phase is often much smoother because the resistance has already been ironed out during the decision-making process.
Which brings us to the third point of the triangle, laissez-faire, or delegated leadership.
This one is very misunderstood.
I mean, historically, I've always thought of laissez-faire as just lazy management. It's the boss who hides in their office, answers emails, and just lets the team fend for themselves.
It is often misinterpreted exactly that way. But the academic literature draws a very sharp distinction here.
Okay, lay it on me.
True laissez-faire leadership is highly strategic, but it requires a very specific, non-negotiable prerequisite: an elite, highly competent team.
Wait, unpack that for me, because if I just leave a team of junior employees completely alone, it's going to be absolute chaos.
Exactly. And the text warns that applying this style to inexperienced staff leads to massive coordination failures and intense anxiety.
Because they don't know what they're doing yet.
Right. People don't know what the standard of success looks like. But think about it this way. It's like driving a car. Autocratic is grabbing the steering wheel yourself. Democratic is having a committee vote on the route.
And laissez-faire is just handing over the keys and going to sleep.
Well, not exactly. You aren't handing the keys to a student driver and taking a nap in the passenger seat. Laissez-faire management is handing the keys to a professional Formula One race car driver.
Oh, I see. Because the driver knows the track better than you do.
Precisely. If you manage a team of expert curriculum designers or senior software engineers, stepping in and trying to democratically manage their daily tasks actually slows them down.
It just creates unnecessary bureaucracy.
Yes. By strategically employing laissez-faire leadership, you are telling the experts, I trust your mastery. My only job is to get out of your way and secure the resources you need.
So when applied correctly to the right demographic, it drives incredible innovation. So, autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire cover the distribution of power. They answer the question of who decides. But having power doesn't mean your team is actually motivated to do the work.
No, motivation is an entirely different mechanism.
Right. How do you drive that motivation? That requires a completely different set of tools, which the research identifies as the 4 modern leadership mandates. transformational, transactional, instructional, and servant leadership.
These styles focus heavily on the psychological levers a leader pulls to influence behavior. Transformational leadership, for instance, is entirely vision-driven.
This is the charismatic leader, right? The one who sells a compelling picture of the future.
Exactly. They inspire a shared vision, they challenge the status quo, and they build massive enthusiasm.
But I was fascinated by the downside listed in the text here. It notes that transformational leadership can be incredibly exhausting.
It demands a lot of energy.
It really does. And when you look at the mechanics of it, it makes sense. You are asking your team to emotionally invest in the work. You are constantly pushing for innovation.
You can't operate at maximum inspirational capacity every day without burning out your staff. People eventually need a break from changing the world.
Which is exactly why instructional leadership provides such an interesting counterweight, at least in the educational context.
Yes, while transformational leadership is focused on the big picture, instructional leadership is hyper-focused on the granular mechanics of the actual work.
So in a school setting, this means a principal who spends hours every week sitting in classrooms, observing teaching methods, and giving direct, actionable feedback.
Yes. The mechanism here is extreme proximity to the core function of the organization.
You aren't managing from a spreadsheet, you are managing from the factory floor.
Exactly. The psychological benefit is that the team feels deeply supported because the leader intimately understands the daily friction of the job.
But the obvious drawback, as the research points out, is that it is incredibly time-intensive.
It is. A leader has to sacrifice higher-level strategic planning to be that present in the trenches.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The next style on the list is where I really want to dig in, because on the surface it feels so outdated. Transactional leadership. The texts define this as leader-directed, based entirely on rewards, consequences, and strict compliance. You hit the performance target, you get a bonus. You miss it, you get a penalty.
It is a pure carrot and stick model.
Exactly. In an era where we talk constantly about finding purpose and meaning in our work, transactional leadership sounds incredibly cold. Is there really a place for that in a modern school or workplace?
What's fascinating here is that it absolutely does have a place. The academic literature defends it quite strongly, precisely because it addresses a very real aspect of human psychology.
Really? Which is
The
word?
need for cognitive relief.
Cognitive relief. Okay, explain that.
Well, think about the exhaustion we just
Yeah.
discussed with transformational leadership. Your employees do not have an infinite well of emotional bandwidth.
Right, they get tired.
Sometimes, an employee doesn't want to be inspired. They don't want to innovate. They just want to know exactly what the rules are, complete the task, and go home to their families.
Wow. Okay, so transactional leadership strips away the emotional burden of work.
Yes. It provides ultimate clarity.
So it actually creates a highly predictable environment.
Exactly. The text highlights that transactional leadership massively enhances short-term efficiency and productivity.
Okay, that makes sense. If you have a massive compliance audit due at the end of the week, you don't need to inspire your team with a vision of a utopian future.
No, you need to say, if we finish these 500 files by Friday at noon, everybody gets Monday off.
It is a clean, unambiguous social contract. It limits creativity, sure, but organizations survive by executing routine tasks efficiently.
Transactional leadership is a highly effective lever for routine execution.
That reframes it completely for me. Clarity really is a form of kindness in management, which leads us to the final style, servant leadership.
This one flips the traditional hierarchy entirely upside down.
Right, the leader prioritizes the needs of the team above everything else, relying on deep empathy to build trust.
The mechanism of servant leadership is fascinating. It operates on the premise that if you remove the physical and emotional roadblocks in front of your team, high performance is the natural byproduct.
A servant leader isn't a pushover, they are a snowplow.
A snowplow, I love that. They are constantly clearing the path.
They're saying, I'm here to make sure you have what you need to succeed. That builds incredible loyalty. But the text does warn that because the focus is constantly on supporting everyone else's needs, decision-making can bottleneck.
Yes, and the leader might be perceived as lacking authority in moments where firm direction is absolutely required.
Which brings us right back to our audio mixing board from earlier.
Exactly. A master manager doesn't just pick servant leader and stick with it permanently.
They slide that fader up when the team is fragile, and they pull it down and push up the transactional fader when a hard deadline requires cold efficiency.
Precisely. Adaptability is everything.
So we have the skills and we have the styles, but how does a leader actually signal to the team which style they are currently using?
That's the critical missing link.
Right, because if you decide to shift from democratic consensus building into autocratic emergency mode, how do you execute that shift without breaking trust?
The research points to a singular vehicle for this: communication management.
And Gordon's work is heavily referenced here, defining communication not just as talking, but as the intricate process of sharing information, ideas, feelings, and feedback to achieve goals.
It actively reduces misunderstandings and workplace conflict. Communication is the delivery mechanism for leadership.
So if leadership is the software, communication is the hardware it runs on.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
And the research categorizes this hardware into four main channels. You have verbal, so your spoken words in meetings and one-on-ones.
Mhm.
You have written, like your memos and official policies. Digital, which is the remote collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams that we all live in now. And finally, nonverbal communication.
And this is where the material gets truly profound.
It really does. Because
Yeah.
it doesn't just list body language as a vague concept. It gives a very specific example of a supervisor offering an encouraging smile during a classroom observation.
It is a vital moment to analyze.
Let's unpack the actual biology of that moment. Imagine you are at work, you are presenting a pitch or teaching a class, and your supervisor is standing in the back of the room evaluating you.
Naturally, you're going to be nervous.
Right. Human beings are biologically wired to perceive evaluation as a social threat. Your heart rate elevates, cortisol floods your system, and you enter a mild state of fight or flight.
Your brain is literally shifting resources away from the prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. Away from where you do your best, most creative thinking and into the amygdala, which handles basic survival.
So you are operating under a severe cognitive penalty.
Yes. But then you glance back, and that supervisor makes eye contact and gives you a warm, genuine, encouraging smile.
A single nonverbal cue.
Smile. And in a fraction of a second, without a single word being spoken, that nonverbal cue short-circuits the amygdala's threat response. It signals to your nervous system, you are safe. I am not a predator, I'm an ally.
And your cortisol drops.
Your cortisol drops, your prefrontal cortex comes back fully online, and your performance instantly improves. That is the raw power of nonverbal communication. It literally manages the biological state of your team.
And this perfectly illustrates why aligning your communication medium with your leadership style is so critical.
Oh, tell me more about that connection.
Well, if you are operating as a transformational leader, you are entirely dependent on that biological management. You need the nonverbal cues, the passion in your eyes, the open posture, the encouraging smile to transmit your vision.
You need verbal communication to tell the story. You cannot be a transformational leader purely through a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But if you shift gears into transactional leadership, the mediums change completely.
Right, because transactional leadership relies on clarity and accountability.
You don't need nonverbal passion for that. You need written documentation. You lean heavily into written and digital communication, bullet points, clear deadlines, documented reward structures.
A memo that clearly outlines the expectations prevents the exact conflicts that the texts warn about.
Exactly. And an instructional or servant leader is going to live heavily in the realm of verbal communication. Active listening, sitting down for one-on-ones, asking questions, and providing constructive spoken feedback.
So the leadership style dictates the communication medium.
They are completely inseparable.
So what does this all mean? Bringing this all together, we started out looking for the secret formula for managing human beings. And what these academic blueprints reveal is that the formula isn't a single, rigid equation.
No, there's no single correct way to manage a team.
The absolute best leaders are essentially shapeshifters. They possess a deep skill stack, and they constantly adjust their audio mixing board.
They cycle through these 7 leadership styles and match them perfectly with the 4 communication methods.
Entirely based on the unique friction of the current moment. Knowing when to be autocratic in a crisis or a servant leader when the team needs support.
This raises an important question, though, because the value of this research only materializes when you apply it to your own environment.
Right. Theory is just theory until you use it.
Exactly. Look at your own workplace right now. Try to identify which of those 7 styles your direct supervisor leans on most heavily. Are they trying to build democratic consensus? Are they operating transactionally?
And more importantly, ask yourself, is their default style actually the right tool for the challenges your team is currently facing? Or are they trying to drive a screw with a hammer?
It's a phenomenal analytical exercise to do.
It really is. But I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. Something that bridges this academic theory with our modern reality.
Okay, I'm listening.
We just spent time breaking down the profound psychological impact of an encouraging smile, right? The absolute necessity of nonverbal communication to build safety and trust. But think about the shift toward fully remote work. If a team operates across 3 different time zones and they rely almost exclusively on digital and written communication, endless text threads, task management software, and occasional virtual meetings where half the cameras are turned off, you are effectively stripping away the entire nonverbal channel.
That is a massive loss of communication bandwidth.
Exactly. So if you physically cannot offer that encouraging smile, is it even possible to be a true transformational or servant leader?
Or does the physical distance and the reliance on screens force leaders to default to purely transactional leadership?
When you can't read the room, do you inevitably just fall back on measuring who checked the box and who met the quota? I invite you to ponder that exact puzzle as you log into your next virtual meeting. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.